Hey, welcome back to another video. Back in voiceover just because I think that works better than refilming myself on a camera. Camera-wise, I'm really nervous and I stutter a whole lot more, so it's just easier for the whole recording process that I do this in voiceover only. But that's not important here. Today, we're going to be talking about the IDW Sonic comics. If you've been following me for a while, you might remember when I used to do videos on the Archie Sonic comics. I haven't done one of those in a really long time, and in the time since I've stopped doing them, the book is no longer running. And I had thought for a while about going back to review them just for fun, but then when we found out that we'd be getting an IDW book, I figured that when that started, I'd talk about it. So that's what we're going to do. In this video, we're going to talk about the first two issues. I've previously attempted to record this video about 8 times on camera, talking about each individual, or the individual first 2 issues. But they're so similar, I think that it fits fine to talk about both of them in the same video. And then the next video that comes out will be on the 3rd issue, which came out today as I'm recording this. Both of these issues, there's not really a story yet. They're very much just sort of setting the way things are going to be, or just sort of setting the stage. They're very basic Badnik fights. The first issue begins with just Sonic, and so you get to see how he'll be acting in this, which is basically the same if you've been reading the Archie books or even familiar with the games. And it ends with him interacting with Tails, so you get peeks at how he is on his own and how he interacts with Tails. And these are things that are important for new readers, a little bit redundant for people that are familiar with the games or familiar with the Archie book, but it's a necessary evil as they're trying to bring in new readers to the book. So even though it is a little repetitive for me personally, because I've followed the Archie book for a while, I understand why it is the way it is, and it's a thing that I'm pretty okay with. It doesn't make the book that much worse. However, if you're going into the first issue and you're wanting already a deep story to be starting, or some kind of plot to really kickstart, you're not really going to get that. There are hints towards a larger plot in the final panels of the issue, but for the most part, it's a standalone fighting the Badnik story, sort of giving a quick introduction to what's going on. It seems like the games are canon, or at least most of them are, because the first issue, the very beginning of it, makes reference to Sonic Unleashed, and the events themselves, or the comics themselves seem to take place directly after the events of Sonic Forces. So I'm fairly sure that the games are canon. I know they've talked about how canon the games are to the IDW book, but I cannot remember exactly what they said. So forgive me if they've said before that all the games are canon, but I don't recall what they said. It seems like they are, though. But that doesn't really does not really mean anything when it comes to the story overall, because the Sonic games don't really have an overall story. That's always been the case. So if you and I've always stood by that, if you want stories with Sonic characters, you read the comics, and I'm willing to bet that the IDW book will continue mostly in the same vein. But as it stands right now, there's not really a story, quote-unquote, going on. Like I said, there's hints of it, but it's mostly just standalone, just sort of standalone Badnik fights and establishing character relationships. Speaking of which, the second issue is more or less the same. Another Badnik fight. However, this time, instead of Sonic interacting with Tails or Sonic being on his own, this one focuses more on Amy and how he interacts with her. If you're just familiar with the games, you're aware of how Amy is. Her sole character trait is that she has a crush on Sonic. That has always been a part of her character in the comics, and right around the time that they got good, it just was a thing that was a part of her character, but unlike her game counterpart, it did not define her character, and very rarely actually really comes up. It's certainly always a thing, and they usually save it for downtime. If there's actual story going on, her obsession with Sonic tends to not really be the focus. Like in the Archie book, Treasure Team Tango is probably my favorite Sonic Universe arc, and it has a lot of Amy in the spotlight. Very rarely, if at all, I think, did it ever even acknowledge her thing for Sonic. And it seemed this first issue with her has a lot of focus on that, but only because she's currently like interacting with him, so that's fine. You get some good banter between the two, which is good because in the in the games, like I've said, it's just kind of the same one-sided, or not really one-sided, but the same interaction between the two of Amy chases after him and Sonic runs away. Rinse and repeat for 20 years. But with this, you get synergy with them working together to fight some badniks and some actually good jokes between the two. Amy has always been written really well by Ian Flynn. Basically, everybody's always been written pretty well by Ian Flynn, who is still writing the IDW book. And it continues here. I really, really like that. So if you either enjoyed how Amy was portrayed in the Archie book, or if you dislike how she's portrayed in the games, read the IDW book, because it's basically good Amy. But once again, in the second issue, there's not any real story going on. There is, like the first issue, hints towards the story in the final panels, but not really anything concrete that happens in it. I can see that getting frustrating for people, and I know I've seen a handful of people that have been disappointed by the book not getting into a story already. Personally, though, while I see and understand and even sort of agree, I think it is necessary for a book this early in its run to have to go slow and bring in new readers and just give a baseline, even for returning readers, for what relative calm is like, even though it is still just, fighting badniks. So while there is that relative lack of story or progression, I think it's a necessary evil in this case, and I don't think it really harms the book all that much. It maybe knocks it down like half a peg. I don't personally think it's that big of a deal. Art-wise, the Sonic comics during the Archie run, for a good while, were pretty shaky with their art. At any given time, for a good chunk of the beginning of the book, you would have bad or mediocre art. But it really got consistently good when Tracy Yardley took over as artist, right around the time Ian Flynn started writing the book. And for the first issue, Tracy Yardley is again drawing it. And Tracy Yardley's style can be a little divisive. I think generally people like it, but I have seen a not insignificant amount of people that aren't huge into it. Me personally, though, I really, really like Tracy Yardley's style, especially given the right colorists and the right inkers. You can get some of probably the best looking Sonic art ever. A lot of the early Sonic Universe stuff, a lot of the early main Sonic the Hedgehog book stuff that he did, I think is the perfect style for Sonic. And his work on this first issue is still very, very good, but it doesn't quite feel as good as Tracy Yardley usually is on it. It's not bad by any means, but there's just something about the way it's drawn. Maybe it's the coloring, maybe it's just the pencils, maybe Tracy Yardley's just not used to drawing Sonic yet, or Sonic again, because it's been a decent amount of time since the Archie book has ended now. It's just one of those things that feels a little off. Not bad, but just not quite there yet, The second issue is drawn by Adam Bryce Thomas, who did some stuff during the Archie books in the 200s, I believe, is when he started, probably late 200s, I can't quite recall. His art style is very different from Tracy Yardley's. It tends to go more anime influenced. Not overtly, but you can still see a little bit of it, especially in the facial expressions. Mainly Amy's facial expressions are something you'd see right out of an anime, or right out of a romance manga or something. Personally, I've never been that huge on Adam Bryce Thomas's style. It's not bad art, just not a thing that really appeals to me. But if you enjoy an anime style, if you enjoy anime styled art, you will probably enjoy his work. To me, I just feel like it doesn't mesh quite well with the book, and maybe that's a little bit ridiculous considering I think a cartoony style like Tracy Yardley's works so well. But I don't know. There's just something about that particular, the particular way that Adam Bryce Thomas draws things that it just doesn't grab me. I would not count it as a negative. It's just more something that doesn't particularly appeal to me. But yeah, that's about all I really have to say. The first two issues are bare bones. Not a whole lot really happens in them, but I think it's doing a pretty good job of introducing the universe that we'll be getting. And it's especially, I think, going to be good for new readers to just sort of ease them into things. You don't really need a lot of prior knowledge of anything Sonic related to start getting into this. Maybe just sort of a base knowledge of what Sonic is and that's about the extent of it. If you know nothing about the games, if you know nothing about the Archie series, if you know nothing about anything other than Sonic is a blue hedgehog who runs fast, you can jump into the Archie book and be a-okay. It's hard really to say if the book is amazing or if it's better than Archie right now just because it just started. But I will say that I think just these 2 issues have been better than a lot of what the Archie book got thrown at it in its final days. Because as good as a writer as Ian Flynn is, during the last legs of the Archie run, due to some things, he was not really putting out the best material. It's not necessarily his fault. It was more creative and Sega not letting him do a lot of the stuff that he had planned. But that was still how the book sort of ended up. And I think just because there's not really anything really insane going on right now, I think on a pure quality level from there, it's sort of a little bit better than what the Archie book had started to become near the end of its life. But as an overall book, it's okay so far. I would still recommend it for people who are into the Archie series, and I would definitely recommend it for people who are mildly interested in Sonic or just want a sort of kid-friendly comic to read. Like, this is the thing that if you want to get your younger nephew or your younger sister or your younger brother into comics, this is the kind of thing that you would give them. Basically, it's just a really good starter book, whether you're getting into comics or getting into Sonic. IDW book is good. Go pick it up. That's about going to wrap it up for this video. Next week, when issue 4 comes out, the video for issue 3 will come out. And then hopefully within a week after that, the video on issue 4 will release. And then once the book hits its monthly schedule in May, those will just be out within probably about a week of the issue's release. That's how I'm planning to do this, with how my scheduling goes and my attempts go. I don't know how well that'll pan out, but we shall see. If you enjoyed the video, then you can subscribe, and hopefully YouTube will tell you when I upload a new one, but they're not so good about that lately. So if you want to know when I've uploaded a new video, you can follow me on Twitter, where I tweet every time I upload a new video, and it's also usually when I remember. The most recent video that I did is my pinned tweet. I'm aware now that I'm recording this that I forgot to do that for the Ninja video, so I'm a genius. But like 90% of the time, the pinned tweet on my profile is my most recent video. So if you really care about when I upload new stuff, you can follow me on there. I also tweet sort of about things that I'm reading or games that I'm playing or shows that I'm watching, so you can sort of get a sneak peek at what videos I'm going to be making if for whatever reason you care about that. So my Twitter is linked in the description, as is my Patreon if you decide you want to throw a couple dollars at me. Not any rewards there for doing so. I'm basically using it as a tip jar right now. I probably should revamp it to give some rewards, but I don't know what people want. So right now it's just as a thing for you to be like, hey, here's a couple dollars because I feel like it. But if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. It's just a thing that's there. Alternatively, if you missed a couple of my previous videos, or you're new and you just want to watch some of the other stuff that I've done, then on screen right now are 2 of my previous videos. On the left, you have the last video I did, which was on Shuriken Sentai Ninja, and then on the right is the video that YouTube has decided it wants you to watch. That's all for now, and I will see you guys next time.